And welcome. My name's Erin Ostrowski. I'm super excited to talk about one of my favorite topics in Power BI, which is data storytelling and specifically visualizations within data storytelling. So I was looking at the polls and it looks like a lot of you, Power BI is very important to your work. So it's critically important to my work. And just to sort of set the scope today, what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking really a lot of design elements, best practices, and why, right? Why does that even matter? And it does. But just to give you a quick introduction to myself to get started, I said my name's Erin Ostrowski. I go by Erin, sometimes Erin O, and my contact information is on the screen. It's also available on our website. If you just look me up, you can find it. I love to interact and engage, so send me an email if you have any questions or follow-up items. This is probably a little bit of a different focus than a lot of our webinar topics because it is very design intensive. And so my background, just to give you a little bit of an idea, is business journalism, specifically print, and also, of course, we had a digital presence. So I spent a lot of time, a lot of years working on design and layout in a newsroom, focused on BI, but from a Northeast Florida perspective. I worked for the Jacksonville Business Journal. So it's fun when I get to take some of those interests and ideas and bring them into Power BI, because what we see again and again is, as I travel around training or doing consulting work even, is that people really want to leverage some of the unique features in Power BI, and they want to really bring the reporting to another level. So the goal of this class today, or this very brief webinar, is to give some skills, some tips, some tricks even of how you could really integrate design elements into your Power BI reporting. Of course, there's so much emphasis and need for emphasis on the ETL work, the modeling, the DAX. It's all critically important to the data storytelling. And it really all is to get to that final point where you produce a report that decision makers are going to see, right? And so how do we influence them? What are our whys, and what are some of the things we can do? So if you're heavy on the developer side, maybe this is something you kind of keep an ear on because you were tasked with creating some reports. If you are a report creator on a regular basis, like I said, hopefully there are some practical how-tos you take from it. We'll get through the beginning as kind of the intro, the slide deck, you got to bear with me, and then we'll jump right in. And so I did do a data storytelling presentation probably in March, so I think it was about 6 months ago, and this one is slightly different. So the first set of slides, the why, we're going to get through that. It's the same, but then the focus and the tactics are going to be a bit different, totally different emphasis. So I'll touch on some of the things covered in the first one, but I may also say, hey, go check that out for a deeper understanding of how to, right? Because we want to cover new ground. We don't want to just repeat what we've already given you. So for today, we're going to go through some slides, and then I'm going to give you some of my top tips from a design perspective, things that I think are really important to consider as you're putting together your report. And then I'm going to go into specifics, especially focusing on the background and how you can use images to enhance your report and really make a Power BI report feel a lot more sophisticated than it is. And also I want to talk about themes, right? Not just the ones they give you, but how you can pretty quickly leverage themes and create your own custom ones, or the value, take value from custom ones that other people have created, line that with your branding. And then we're going to talk a little bit about visualization types. I want to point you to a great resource that I'll use when I'm thinking about that big picture narrative and how do I visualize this, you know, with a graph, what type of visual do I use? And then the final element, time withstanding, is going to be going through that bookmark and selection pane, which is so critical to navigation and allows us to have that sort of web design feel when our end users are using our Power BI reports. And so a lot of the bookmarking selection pane I did cover in that first webinar. So if you love it, you want more of it, then I suggest checking out that first webinar from March. It's on our website. And at the end, we'll probably have time for questions. So let's just jump right in and get these slides out of the way. I always joke with people like, sorry, I have to put you through slides, but hey, it is important information. And sometimes this type of information can help you craft your pitch to your boss or to somebody else that's wondering, why does this even matter? Or you have to make a case for investing time in the report, because it just doesn't make sense to create reports that have so much work on the back end but don't look good. It just doesn't make sense to me. So let's talk about data storytelling, like why it even matters. It matters because it impacts how we think, what we feel, and ultimately decisions that are made, behaviors that are taken. Like my background is also PR, public relations. So we're always thinking and studying, how do we not only put ideas into people's minds, but how do we get them to act in a certain way, or how do we hit those nerves, right, that can catalyze action? Because just knowing something cognitively isn't necessarily compelling enough to make decisions or to even elicit specific behaviors, right? There can be a very strong disconnect between that. But storytelling is a bridge piece. It is super impactful because it's always been impactful. Humans are social, we're communal. We take this element of all that data and those insights, all that black and white sort of quantitative information, and now we add the human element to it. My dad always said facts before feelings, report the facts and then support it with emotions. And I think this is sort of the approach with data storytelling, right? We start with our data, we investigate, we dissect it, disseminate it, and go, what is here? What's the story? And then we think of how this matters most to our end user. And storytelling affects the brain. It hits a trigger, right? So go ahead, think back to, childhood, your teenage years. What did you do when you got together with friends? You start exchanging stories, right? And that's how you understand other people. And you could think even of, memories being transferred from one generation to another. So there's not statistical, scientific evidence, that the brain does change and it impacts the brain. So as people are making connections in their mind, it's a deeper response, right? And it can affect the emotions. And so that's really what we're looking at. It's one of the main reasons why storytelling matters. Frankly, storytelling that is incorporates data is more persuasive usually, right? I think, was it Mark Twain that was like statistics and bleep more statistics, right? So there's probably a line with how convincing it is, but it is true, right? The more factual information, the more data driven you are, the more credibility that can be derived from that. Because again, we're looking at analyzing and breaking down the evidence, and then we're coupling that with the why does this matter. So I think that there is a strong case for data storytelling in particular to be a top interest and pursuit for all of us. And so I think it's clear it's important. If anybody disagrees, send me a message, right? I would love to hear why you think it's not as important, but I'm pretty convinced that it is. But why don't we do it, right? Why is it that even if we know something's important, we don't necessarily take the action steps ourselves? Well, first of all, maybe you feel like I don't have the personality for this, or I'm better with the data, the ETL work, and they tasked me with finishing the report. It's not my thing. I don't even look at colors and think what goes together. Design's not my element. So I think there can be a level of maybe intimidation or just being uncomfortable with the creative side, right? The creative side of presenting information and data. So let's dissuade that fear right now. That's what I tell classes when I train them. I'm like, my first rule in my classroom is no fear. Like, we're not going to be afraid of making mistakes, of trying new things, and really just having that open mind. Hopefully what I will be able to show you is that there are some really quick, I don't want to call them hacks, but there's some quick ways to raise up the level of your design and data storytelling. So even if you feel like I'm not qualified to be that creative, you could probably add some pretty cool elements. Don't worry about it, right? No fear. And so another reason maybe we don't take time is we're busy, right? We are so busy working with the data, wrangling it, building out those DAX measures. We're so busy with our managers' meetings, our schedules. We're busy with lunches. We're busy with family. We're just busy people. And so again, this kind of reinforces the idea, while this takes some effort and time, maybe I don't want to go there. Well, remove that a little bit, I think there's a case for, that if you're going to do all that work, you should go there. Let's make it easy. Let's make it fun. Let's make it attainable in the shortest amount of time, right? And figure out how we can be efficient. Because one of the things with Power BI is that you'll notice there's a lot of like rinse and repeat. That's the phrase I picked up from my boss. He's rinse and repeat, do it again, right? So you'll find once you get a pattern for building out your reports, you start leveraging that. It's fast. It's a lot quicker than you think. So I think we can drop down the amount of time it takes to do creative and awesome work that really reflects all of that hard work on the back end. So in terms of the elements of data storytelling, of course, we start with the data, right? What's happening? Those are our facts. That's where we want to go to start. And then we pull out the narrative. What is really being said? What's important? Why does this matter? What's the most important information? In journalism, for example, we start out every news article, if it's a real news article, is going to start out with a lead, a first sentence that just hits the hardest facts at the beginning, what matters most. And so there's that element in the narrative of saying not only what matters, but in what order does it matter. And once you've looked at the data, you've established priorities, what's really being said, the critical information, you've kind of ordered it in your mind, then we really get into how do I show this in the best way possible. And there's interplay between visualization and developing the narrative, because sometimes you're exploring the data through the visualization and then your narrative's being developed as a developer. But ultimately, like what we're talking about with data storytelling is not just the exploration of that to come up with our conclusions, to come up with the trends, the analysis. It's really to say, okay, now I've done that. What's the best way to present this to my end user, right? And we're business users primarily, so thinking of things like business priorities and who in particular am I presenting this to a CFO? Am I presenting this to HR? Is this going to the board of directors? They're going to all have different perspectives on what really matters, and so you have a lot of great opportunity to showcase everything that's been done by teams of people typically, and it's important. You want to look good. You want to make the people around you look good, and so we start with that end first and think about our audience, think about what the data is telling us, and then we start to incorporate what's the purpose of this. And so I put a couple of like the main kind of purposes that I often will see. There could be a call to action. So is there something that needs to be catalyzed, a response that needs to be catalyzed? Maybe it's by an individual or a team or a department or even across the organization. What's the drive? Right? Are you trying to be persuasive? And that goes right with changing minds. If you don't have buy-in from people mentally, emotionally, you're relationally, like you're not necessarily going to get the actions that you want out of that. And so that is all shaping of culture. That's all part of establishing beliefs, and organizations put a lot of effort and a lot of money into establishing their branding and their mission and their value sets and reinforcing that. And so we really can think of Power BI and the data storytelling we do as an extension of what is already happening, and then potentially as a catalyst for change. So I think there's kind of two ways to look at it. We look at where we're coming from and where we want to go. That's really how I tend to see things when I'm putting together data stories. So let's jump in now. We've covered how important it is. I got you with the slides. Take a sip of water, stand up and stretch, and let's keep going. So let's start talking design. Let's talk about specific things that can make or break your reporting efforts. So right away, one of the things that I will see when I'm out on the road is, and I'll never call somebody out individually, especially not in a webinar or something, but overdoing the amount of information on a given page. That Power BI canvas is not huge. You can extend it. You can change the background size. That's an option, of course, but the default size is not it's not huge, right? And so I'll look, and sometimes I'll see people cramming like 10 charts, really small, all next to each other, or they put a table with 15 columns, and then they're putting all these KPIs right next to it, but it's just so much, it's so crowded, it's not great. And so one of the first rules of thumb, and Yeah, I'll say it. I'll say it. A lot of times it's my guys that do this. I shouldn't say it, but this past year from what I've seen, a lot of times it's the guy or the girl who's really strong on the back end. They have built out an amazing model. They know the data. They know what it's saying. I mean, they are the person you want on your team. But then they're like, hey, look at how this looks. And all their amazing work just, it plummets in that visual view because they just put so much on one page, and they're not leveraging the multiple pages and how you can navigate and the ability to pop up and have layered information. So less is more. Just because you have a lot of information doesn't mean you should put a lot of information all together. Like, this is a very real website. It's a picture of, and it's, I mean, it'll cause a seizure probably. It's horrible. There's so much going on. You don't even really know what you're supposed to look at. So we always want to be really clear, what is our focal point? And you can only establish that when you leave enough space and sufficient room for there to be a focus point, right? It's kind of like, I think of interior design. It's like walking into a room. If you walk into a room that has a modest amount of furniture, pictures, you're going to notice how the room feels. You're going to see the different elements. If you walk into a room and there are stacks of newspapers and there are like 3 big couches all crammed together with a coffee table in the middle, and there's art everywhere, it just gets confusing and it feels overwhelming. So let's not do that. If you're doing that, stop. If you're not doing that, good, keep going. And then right before, this is like my last slide before we jump into some of the specific tactics of how to apply this. But these are some of my design tips, right? Like and some of them I've taken from other fields of study. So it's design principles on a whole. Some of them are specific to report writing or even journalism when you're trying to create that final product for people to digest. So first one is a 5-second rule. So before you ever present your report to anybody officially, right? Find a stranger, preferably a work stranger that's just like walking by your desk, and I say stranger, I mean like stranger to the project, somebody that is not 100% familiar with what you're doing, and very quickly have them look at your screen. Have them look at your Power BI report and give them 5 seconds. Just tell them, hey, I want you to look at this and then tell me what it's about. So you give them 5 seconds, really probably 10. I mean, it's called a 5-second rule, but probably like 5 to 10 seconds to glance at the screen, take a look, and then cover it, right? Cover it up, shut it down, don't let them see it anymore, and then ask them, well, what did you notice? What is this about? What do you see? What's your impression of this? And if they can't tell you clearly what your report is about at a glance, then you may want to consider, what is the message I'm sending? Because first impressions are huge. We all hear about how resumes, they're going to look at it for 3 seconds and then move it along in the pile. It's not that different. We do that with people, right? We look at them, and even it's subconscious. We look and our brains make split decisions. It just goes right in. And so the way you do that, whether you have that, choose to be, I don't want to say responsible, but choose to be thoughtful about what that first impression is. It's huge. It matters. If they feel overwhelmed, if it's not clear, if the colors are conflicting, that kind of thing, you have a problem. All your hard work is being completely masked by a point of confusion, right? By a distraction. And so that's my first tip. 5-second rule, test it out, do it. It's important. And then I'm going to move to like the side of this slide. So flow top left to right. So in the United States, in Europe, at least Western Europe, we tend to read top left to right. And so that is the flow for the audience in the Western part of the world. So when you're thinking about your page layout, that is always a general rule of thumb, that the very important items, the key indicators, whatever it may be, will often be top left to right. If you're going to move your space over, are you doing it intentionally? No matter what, people are going to read left to right, and they're going to start at the top of the page. So that's something to think about. If it doesn't make sense to bury items down at the bottom or in that right corner. Right? Rule of odd numbers. It's actually a really important design element. So it's typically something you'll see in interior design, fashion design, but also it was something we used a lot in journalism. The fact that design works well with odd numbers. That little bit of asymmetry, and it doesn't have to be asymmetrical, but the odd numbers they stick in our brains. And so 3s, 5s, and 7s. 7 items on a Power BI report might be a little crowded. It kind of depends on those items. We typically advise 4 to 6 main visuals. But that being said, I would tell you probably use like 5 to 7, right? Or if you're gonna play out the odd numbers, because it's impactful, it's a proven design concept, something to think about if you've never heard about. Play with the odd numbers. It sticks. And so moving from that, you've got those visuals on the page. Leave some white space. White space is your friend. It's okay. It's like having a conversation and pausing. And I'm a bad example of this right now because I'm chitter-chattering right through this webinar, and I keep talking. But if we were having a dialogue, I would stop and I would listen, and I would, there would be a pause, and maybe there would be a point, if it's a good conversation, where we both pause. And so a pause, white space, visually white space, that's a good thing. It's important because the white space is what also allows the emphasis on the visuals. So do not use up all your white space if you can help that. And when I say white space, I don't mean you have a white background. I just mean that there's space on your canvas that is not dominated by a visual. That's important. And that could be just as intentional. Sometimes what's left off is just as important as what's included, right? That being said, let's move on to the concept of symmetry and balance. So in terms of how we look at things, studies show that human beings typically have a high value on symmetry. And you think, well, how does that work with odd numbers, right? Those like almost seem conflicting. They don't have to be conflicting because, of course, mirroring, right? You could have things set up so that there's symmetry even with an odd number. But also there's this concept of balance. So if you have, for example, 2 like graphs, right? Those should be balanced, and they're conveying information of similar importance. Balance them, right? Top to bottom, left to right, however you're doing it, make sure that there isn't one that's especially dominating over the other, unless you want that to be the case. That symmetry and that balance is important to think about, because again, humans are subconsciously just looking at it and they're making split decisions. And we know that symmetry is something that humans value all across the world. The only culture, and this is about valuing like facial beauty, right? But the only culture where symmetry wasn't the highest value in terms of beauty was Japan, and they valued balance. So I put both those up there because they play together. That final concept is get your palette together, right? So I say this, and I say it in light especially of branding, in terms of continuing your organization's message. Get your palette together. You really only need to do it one time. I'm going to show you some quick and easy ways to do that so it's not so intimidating. I'll point you to some resources too. It's worth it. That time invested at the beginning can be something that everybody on the team uses, and it's not just for you to be a brand ambassador and continue the message, but also if you take care of this element, then potentially, at least in the gigs I'm working on right now, that becomes something that's a shared resource, that theme, those color palettes, and it provides consistency across the reporting experience. So users start to know what to expect. There becomes that familiarity. And with that brings adoption, right? And that goes back to our first point of persuasion. So these are all important elements, I believe. As far as the big picture goes, those are some of my key tips, or things that I share with people when I'm working with them. So there you go. And now let's talk tactics. So I'm going to cover background images and how you can use those, and we're going to show you. I'm going to demo it. And then also themes are very important. So those will be the first 2 we tackle. So background images, I put work smart, not hard, right? So if you've ever seen those really great reports and it looks like there's a landing space for each button and the title has its own space and everything just seems so laid out nicely, if it's Power BI, chances are somebody used an image on the background just to set the stage. It's kind of like a backdrop in theater, right? You could have your actors on the stage, and it could be minimalist theater, there could be no background, but if you're trying to show a production, you probably want a background. So consider using background images as a way to really add sophistication and also draw your users' attention to the areas that you're most interested in. There are basic tools for this. So I'm going to show you one of my favorite hacks. That's what it's nothing crazy, but it's PowerPoint. Like I use PowerPoint. The resolution works. It allows me to manipulate the background and the images how I want pretty quickly, save it as a JPEG, and boom, I'm off to the races. So I'm going to show you that pretty quickly so you can kind of get a feel. But it's one of my tips. It's one of my kind of pro hacks is like use PowerPoint to make your own background image, right? Once again, you want to think about branding. If you already have colors and themes in your logo, PowerPoint's a great tool to use for building out a background image because you've got that eyedropper. You can pull and be consistent across your color coding. And I say all this to say that you really, when your users look at it, they shouldn't notice the background. They should notice the data story. That background is all there just to support what's really happening. Like I said, just, you know, in theater, for example, you're going to look at the backdrop and the set, right? But really you're focused on the storyline, you know, what the actors are communicating. And so your visuals are like your actors, they're on stage. And then that backdrop really just supports what's happening in the scene and what's going on in the message that's coming across. So we just want to be consistent when we are doing this because it's important, right? It would be a little crazy to go from, say, some bright palette with tropical colors, and then the next page on your report has, you know, muted tones, neutrals, right? We want to find some consistency that kind of ties in with branding, but let's jump in. Let's jump in right now and let's create a background image. So I told you I use PowerPoint. I do, I love it. And so all I did was I have basically 4 images just because I wanted to kind of give an idea. So I have 4 images here, and I'm going to shut that for a second. I have 4 images that any one of these really could use, not this one, for a background. I kind of put that as a joke. Don't use a background like this. Like that was a joke. I was going to kind of show you like something like this though could be really important. So let me find, where is my thing? Okay. This kind of background, if you add a transparent layer, it's a little bit bold as it is. Say, for example, you wanted to put a film over it or make it more transparent. It could be a workable background. I used a background like this in a tooltip, and it worked very nicely. Something like this will probably be distracting in most cases unless you have some type of overlay or it is set to transparent. But it's just to give an idea. If you have, you know, a special page, a landing page, you can use different backgrounds for different pages. Maybe you have a Power Apps custom visual and you put that on this page and this is the submit your idea page, right? Well, we're looking at light bulbs. Light bulbs are a symbol for ideas. There's one moving. So something like this might be appropriate if your purpose is to solicit ideas. And we know Power BI, you can get some write back right into your report if you use, say, a Power Apps custom visual. So this is an interesting case. I put this one as a joke, like don't do it. It's kind of funny. I guess if you were doing shark statistics, you know, something like that for the Oceanographic Club or some association, this might work, but I would say don't. And then this final one right here is really a great, you know, sort of background canvas space. So quickly, what I can do is I could start to, I could build out a tile up at the top, right? And let's say I wanted to adjust my fill. Well, I can use this eyedropper tool right here, and I could get the blue to match perfectly. So there I just matched it to a tone that's already in there. So that hue looks pretty good. If I wanted to add another space, so I take something like a rectangle here and go ahead and add that. Maybe on the side here, I plan to have some buttons, right? And so once again, I'm going to change this color. I just go ahead and I'm going to use the right click here, change that fill. I can use that eyedropper tool, right? And I want to, maybe this time I'm going to use that light sort of aqua color is what it's called. So this isn't necessarily, you know, what I would always choose, but it's okay for now. So I've got a title space, I've got a sidebar. If I wanted, I could potentially start adding more shapes, circles, different, if I was gonna have buttons along my side. You know, you can be really thoughtful of how you wanna set this up. And so I have this right here. All I have to do is go ahead and save it as a JPEG. So let me make sure I'm in the right location. Yep. All right, that looks good to me. And then I'm just going to save this as a JPEG. Right down here at the bottom, it's going to ask me, you know, do I want to save all of it or just one? I'm just going to use this one right here because I like it. And then I head over to the Power BI desktop. And let me pull that up. And so here I am. I have a blank canvas space, right? Well, if I go over to, let me see if I can, whoop, that is not my zoom function. So if I go over here to my format bar, I can go to page background and I could add an image. So let's go ahead and add the image that I just made, right? That was pretty quick and easy. So it's under, let's see, data storytelling and the webinar. And so here I can see it right there. Now, hold on, what's going on? I can see that it's here, but it's not. Okay, here's one of your tips if you've never added a background image. The transparency default in Power BI is 100%. Change it. I don't know why you would have transparency set to 100%. I think it's a strange thing. It's not my favorite thing about Power BI. But if you pull in an image and you're like, I just don't see it, I can see it here. Check that transparency right above. And go ahead and look at, I can make it match what I created in the PowerPoint. I could set the level of transparency. If I was using something like that light bulb example, I would almost certainly use a level of transparency or some type of box over it, right? That was just semi-transparent so that I wasn't focused on the background. But in this case, you know, that looks all right. And here you go, I have a background, right? So if I wanted to start adding, you know, buttons to this, I could go ahead and do that. If I have images I want to add, I want to start adding my title. Right away, you can see there's different sections. So the eye is going to be drawn to different areas on the report. This is a quick way to boost your sophistication and visualization. And you can build it out pretty darn quickly. So that took all of 5 minutes with an explanation, right? Let's jump in. Let's talk about themes because that's kind of the second element right here, right? I've got this, but if I start bringing in visuals, for example, and I want to look and let's say color, right? Because I can search. I love that about Power BI. So if I guess I have to add something. So let me put the word description here. So if and maybe that's not a good one. Let's see. I can do job change, job growth. Okay, so at least I got something on the page here, and let's do it by maybe salary. Does that work? Okay, so there's not much data here, but my main point, that was not my main point, is to look at the colors that I'm given. So Power BI is going to default to their palette. This was one, I guess, that was imported, but what if it doesn't match, right? What if my theme doesn't match? Well, let's talk about that because themes are important. This is going to tie in your background, your branding. And so let's talk about themes really quickly. So bring this back up. So you have different options when it comes to using themes in Power BI. You can make your own theme. It's a JSON file. It's a fairly easy file to create. I'm going to show you some resources of how you would do this. I am all about reinforcing the branding and using the right fonts, right? My boss makes fun of me, but we have this document and it drives me bonkers because it has 5 fonts unintentionally, and I could just, like, I twitch a little, right? I'm just like, why are there 5 fonts? They're all different types. There's no purpose. So themes can allow you to encapsulate all of your formatting, all of your colors in one space, and you can use your own custom ones. You could start with ones that are in the community gallery. I'm going to show you that. You can modify them once you've got, you say, hey, I like this one. These colors work. These don't. I'm going to change out the font type. You know, there's nothing wrong with taking somebody else's amazing work in this type of setting and then modifying it for yourself, right? We want to be efficient. Going back to that point of why we do or don't do this, we want to be efficient. One of the things I do up front is I gather hex codes. So let's go look online and I'll kind of show you what I mean by that. Right here, for example, this is just imagecolorpicker.com. This is one that I like to use. So for example, if I was going to really build this out, I could take that picture that I just made. So that was in documents, data storytelling, the webinar. Let's see if I can find it. And I think it's this last one. Let's make sure though. Okay, no, date modified. That is today. Okay. I think it's this one. So I'm going to grab that. If I send that image, It's like we all hope the internet works quickly when you're doing a thing. Oh, well, this is a different one, but that's fine. So you would put your image here. Maybe you put your logo here. Maybe you put a picture from your website, whatever it is that it could be just inspiration. You're like, hey, I love this picture. I want to go with these colors. So what you do is you upload it, you click on it, right? And then if you notice right over here, what happened immediately was I got these HTML code, also known as a hex code, RGB codes, HSV. What you can do is you can pretty quickly take that information, and I have one that's already done and I'm working on for a client. And what I did is I copy pasted that, right? I pulled up a little notepad and I started grabbing colors and building out my theme. And I took that, and then when I went to powerbi.tips.com, put it in their theme generator. I like V1. They're on V3 right now. I like version 1. And I just started ordering them. So if you were to use this website in particular, which I'm not endorsing it, there's a lot of great websites, that HTML code is the one you would use in building out your report theme. And so you can go ahead and start consolidating that and comparing it. And once you've done it one time, it's done. You have these hex codes, you have these colors, and you've built out your palette. It becomes something very comprehensive. You don't need to repeat the effort. It works for you again and again and again. So that's one way to do it from scratch. You can also go over, and if you are going to do it from scratch, there is a resource. It's a great document on Microsoft's website I wanted to show you. So if you look up custom report themes in Power BI, you will find this, and you can see right here, there's very specific fonts, colors that they're using in this example. These are the ones that are built in, and this page kind of runs you through how you would import a theme. I'll show you very shortly. But it also breaks down what are the different elements, and then you can see right here you have this option. Here's an example of a very simple, it's a JSON theme. Here's the code. You could just copy it and get started. Like I said, if you see this pattern, it's not that difficult. Then you say you have that list of hex codes, you just put them in and you get going, right? And so you can see the background here is FFFF, I think that's white. And so you can start specifying what are your colors. It works with tables, table accent, fonts. It can get pretty elaborate, but this is a nice, simple template to work with if you're building this out yourself. One thing I will say is that it's not going to automatically order the colors in a logical sequence. And so when I say logical sequence, I mean moving in a gradient fashion. So the eye naturally wants to organize information, including colors. So my suggestion is good old Roy G. Biv, even if you're working with two colors, so that's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. It's the rainbow, right? It's the rainbow. So working on that spectrum, you can just, even if you're using two colors, say you're using red and you're going to green for whatever reason, work through it in the middle and all your colors, and start at one side with the darkest grade of it and work your way through to the opposite color in the darkest grade and everything in the middle. And then when you're looking at your themes, it'll make more sense, right? And so that's just a tip of how I would do it. I like to have things organized. So this is where you would go for that. If you're like, that's just too much work, I'm not about that life, that's okay. Let's cut to the quick and easy. Right here, Power BI has a community theme site, so you can find that. This is a themes gallery. Right off the bat, you can look and see what are the colors, what do they look like. It gives you a good idea. There's pages and pages of them. It goes to 9. So I like this one, University of Melbourne. If I want to grab this, that blue looks all right with me. It's kind of going with my background image that I just made very quickly. All I would have to do is go ahead down here and I can grab that JSON theme, and so, or that file, excuse me, and it's going to download. And so let me pull up my download folder really quickly. Where did my folder go? Okay, it's over here. All right, so let's pull this over. So I see right here, I've got this theme. All I'm going to do is move it right into the file I'm working in. So I'll copy that boy, or maybe I'll just cut it because it doesn't really need to stay there. And I'm going to put it in with my folder where I've got everything else. Consolidate your work, right? Keep it all one space, keep it organized, and you will be a lot happier as a person. So let me put this in here with my webinar. And in fact, I wonder if it might already be here, but just paste that in there. All right, I've got my theme. Now let's head over to Power BI right here, and all I have to do is import it. So right up at the top, I can switch my theme. These are the pre-baked ones. I'm going to import it. Let's see what happens. if I zoom out, you can see I've got this University of Melbourne. That's the one I just created. So I bring that into Power BI, I get a success message, and let me just make like a table really quickly. All right, let's see if I can demo it. Well, this is, all right, so a map, it gave me a map. That's okay, we'll use this to start. It's just an example. So if I were to bring this in here, I can now test it out. I've got this visual selected. Now I go to data colors, and here's my theme. And you know what? This is a case where, for example, it's all right. You know, I grabbed one that was off the theme gallery. Maybe what I want to do now, I want to go in that JSON file and I want to swap it out. So if I were to do that, what I could do is pretty quickly, let me zoom out. I could head back over if, for example, I had that hex color that I really wanted to grab. Go ahead, reorder it, put it in my list, and then let me see if I can find right here. So let's see, date modified, here we go. So I'm gonna open this with Notepad++ just to give an idea to start. So all I would have to do, if I know the order of those colors, especially if I had a picture up, I could go, okay, that third one was the one I didn't love. Let me swap it out, go to that website where I did the eyedrop color, copy paste that code, put it in there, and suddenly I have a customized palette. It fits my needs. It meets what I want. So that's a quick way to kind of piece those elements together. And you know, within 15 minutes now, I've got a background, I've got a working theme, and that can specify my font. I'm already heading in the right direction. Of course, if I was doing this for a specific company, I would bear in mind the branding. I would keep that in mind. I'm working with a client right now, and one of the feedback I got from another report writer was she had done this report. It was a ton of work from the team. They had just built out a whole tabular model in their data warehouse. Massive effort. The report does what it should. Everything's right. And when she presented it, one of the first things the person said was, "That's not Hanes. That's not the company that, you know, she was working." So we're working on adjusting the theme. That's not, you know, Coca-Cola. That's not the NFL. That's not whatever your Procter and Gamble, whatever your theme is. So bear that in mind, that your end users, especially if they're business users, may have a very strong emphasis on the reports looking like they belong to your company. So it's hard sometimes for us as developers or on the back end. You spend so much time making it work functionally that it's like, this doesn't matter. That's a small detail, but it might be the make or break in fact when it comes to your audience, right? And you would hate for your work not to be digested or appreciated for something as silly as like, those colors aren't us, it doesn't work. So you guys can do this. It doesn't take that much time. This is fine. You can get it done. It's pretty quick. All right, so let's talk visual types. So some of you have been doing this for a long time. You know what your graph should look like. You know which charts to pull. Is it a scatter plot? Is it a line chart? Is it a map? Is it a map with dots? You may already be somebody that is very, very good at picking out the right visual for your report. But maybe you know what the data says or you're exploring it, but you need some direction with how to, what type of visual is best for this type of story. So I'm going to show you an awesome resource. I use it, I refer to it. It's fabulous. So if we head online and we go, and by the way, all these resources will be available on the slide deck, and also when Crystal and I follow up, or she sends that email out, then we will make sure to include that, because I know I'm kind of moving through stuff. So so what I did is initially I just searched Power BI Data Stories Gallery. If you have never seen this, welcome. This is probably one of your new best friends, especially if you're brand new to the report writing side of things, or if you need to take it to another level. It's similar to the Themes Gallery in the sense that it belongs to our community of Power BI users, and people submit their hard work. And so once again, you can really benefit from what somebody else has done. Why recreate the wheel? In this case, I want to show you this website, to kind of give an indicator of the many different ways you can visualize your information. And this is called Data Stories. So it goes with data storytelling, and you may look through here and find what you need as a way to show your information. But there is one particular report that I love. I downloaded this report. I went to the guy's website and I read all his articles and I've read all the Financial Times articles with it. I was like, this is awesome. So it's taking a second to load, but what this is the Financial Times visual vocabulary. So if you're getting started and what types of visuals should I use for my story, thinking about how the data is working together, what's being extracted in the analysis, is this a point of correlation? Is this a change over time? Is it part to whole? Am I ranking something? Am I showing a relative magnitude? All these different factors. You start here on page 1, and it gets you going. So I can click on, say, it's a change over time that I'm focused on. I'm doing, a rolling year profit over a rolling profit, something like that, or I'm comparing multiple years together. Well, what it does is it gives you some of the best visual representations of that type of information. So it starts with a broad focus. What type of information are you showing? And then it nails into the specific ways that you can do that, the specific tactics, right? And some of these are custom visuals. Some of them are Python visuals. There's a checkbox if you wanted to take the ones that are custom Python or R visuals, although they're great libraries for that. But some of these are pre-baked right into Power BI. Some of them are custom visuals. Let's talk about that too, right? But this is probably, in my opinion, one of the best resources, this goes on and on, for how you can conceptualize and move from the idea of this is the story I need to tell with the data to now I'm telling the story. So I love this resource. I'm a huge fan. I give this guy a lot of props for putting it together. That was no small feat, and you can download it and have it on your local machine like I do. So, and I just reference it as needed or share it with people. So SQL Jason, I heart you. I see that you are the one that put this on here. Thank you. You can go to his website. I recommend it. So this is, like I said, one great resource embedded within the bigger resource of the Data Stories Gallery. And I mentioned custom visuals, so let's show how we would do that, right, in Power BI. So I'm gonna go ahead and just delete that because it's a little funky looking. And custom visuals, we can access them 2 ways. One within the desktop is going to be here. Go to import from marketplace, right? And you would have to be signed in. So apparently I'm not signed in. And actually I'm working on a VPN right now, so I'm not going to sign in, but I will show you online what you would end up seeing is, let's see, right here. If you go to store.office.com, and over here in the side corner, this is the exact same thing that you would use to import. You're going to see the same items. You go to Power BI Visuals, and all of these same items, it's the same library for both. So you can go to them online and download it, or you can download it directly within the desktop. Both will point you in the same direction. And you can search by type. So over here on the side, once you've sort of figured out this is what I want to do, start looking. Do I want to filter? Do I want to gauge? Do I want a KPI? Do I want to show cards? That type of thing. You can even go by industry because there are certain trends that we see across industry, and they've organized it that way. So these are more resources for how to build out a bomb.com awesome Power BI report. I use all these resources, and they're pretty quick, right? They're things I can access pretty quickly. So I love that because I want to be efficient. I know you want to be efficient. Time is of the essence. And so the last thing is kind of a quick thing, is bookmarking and selection pane. We're coming to the end here, so I didn't get a ton of time to talk about this, but I did cover bookmark and selection pane. In other words, taking what you've created, once you have built out your theme, you have your theme, you have your background, you have your visuals, then guiding that user through the experience. That navigation is done with the bookmark and selection pane. And so if this is something that really interests you, go ahead and check out that first webinar. I cover it in depth. That's what the demos are about in that one. This was way more design focused in this webinar because I didn't cover that in the last one. So tons of use cases. It can make you feel like you're working on a website at the end for the end user. It can help to have, you can have it really multiplies, it increases the amount of space you have on a given page because you're able to layer things. I call it like a magic trick when I'm teaching. I'm like, all right, so really here's the Wizard of Oz, right? This is what people think it is at the end, and here's what we're really doing. So one of the most common ways we see this is on a page where there are a ton of different filter options and in slicers where people would be making multiple selections. We can make a bookmark of of the page in its default state with no slicer selected, right? It's unfiltered, well, it's filtered, but it's unfiltered explicitly by the user, and have a reset icon that navigates to that. And so if they want to reset the page, we'll see that that's a very common and great use for bookmarking and selection pane. Once again, go to the other webinar if you kind of like to see more of how to do that. I am going to show you really quickly, though, what I mean. Go back to this report. And so here is a report. This is just an image that I had made. Once again, I used PowerPoint. I took this. This is called the Bend. I think I got it from powerbi.tix.com. And then I modified it for my purpose. So I added some extra elements to it, put a title up at the top. Okay, it's fine. It's there. But what does this really look like in practice, right? Let me grab this. So here's what it ends up being in practice. So let me show the bookmark and selection pane so we kind of get an idea here. But what's happening is I created bookmarks of each different page in this case, and then and of course I'm using the control select button to make it happen while I'm in developer mode. But what I did was I took pictures of all these different pages down at the bottom, and I saved them as bookmarks. And so they're over here. You can kind of see my bookmarks. I've got my overview page, economic impact, all of that. And then I set the action on that, right? So I put these buttons on that bend so it would give it a feel of navigation. And then when my users click on it, they're taken to the page that they would expect to see. So it's like it's a navigation pane essentially that's built in there, and so they can go ahead and click and go to whatever page they want. Additionally, I built in navigation up at the top. These arrows will take you sequentially through the pages. So this option allows you to jump through page to page, and this one allows for that sequential navigation. So if I was presenting this, I would just start working my way through it to go from top to bottom. I'm getting some kind of sign-in thing. I don't want to sign in. Okay, cancel. Thank you. All right, and so another element is I use these information icons throughout, and so if you click on this, and this was using bookmark and selection pane, so I essentially put a rectangle on the background. I put this memo that pops up when someone clicks on it, and it wasn't something where I had to be text heavy on my report. It's something where I took the text, I took the important message, follow-up message, and I built out an additional layer on top. And so I saved myself space, I saved myself the headache of congestion, and I utilized Power BI's ability to support a pop-up functionality. All of that using selection and bookmarks pane. I show that in the other webinar. But that's kind of an overview of really what I think are some of the most important elements. Like I said, I went through a little quickly on this bookmark and selection pane, but hopefully you kind of get to see how that can be played out, once things like a background are implemented. Like this report right here utilizes a picture background. It utilizes a theme. So when I'm here and I'm working on this visualization, I didn't want the default colors that were available to me. So I imported the theme. I used that, and that was really important to me, that I was consistent in my messaging. The font that I used, I wanted to be consistent, and so these colors work well. That's a palette that makes sense in this particular instance. So this report kind of has all those different elements tied together, and it's just one example. There's many more, many better ones on the data story gallery, but this was just a fun way to kind of tie it all together. So here are some of the resources. Like I said, I will make sure to give those to Crystal if you're looking for ways to pull those hex colors quickly. But those are really some of my main thoughts, and hopefully I showed you quickly, probably too quickly, but hopefully I showed you, some ways to efficiently really elevate your design in your report. Don't waste your hard work. Go ahead and put it together. Get your theme together. Get some background images, and it's worth it because once you've done it once, you have a template, right? You can export that as a template. You can reuse some of those elements again and again and again. You don't have to recreate all these components. Make it well. use it. You play around when you're getting an idea. Oh, I like this. I don't like that. But once it's set, it's yours. So thank you for joining me on this webinar. Aaron Ostrowski, it's been a pleasure to be with you today. I hope this were some tips or, something that was of benefit to you. If you have any questions or feedback, let me know. I would love to hear it, and I will definitely reply with an email. You can also email Crystal and I'll get that. So thank you all for being here today. I think we're right at the top of the hour. So I appreciate y'all, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope it's beautiful, like the Power BI reports that you're going to make. So appreciate you. Talk to you later. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you so much, Aaron. We appreciate you hosting the webinar. Like I stated before, you guys, if you guys have any questions or concerns, and like Aaron was stating before, please feel free to reach out to us. And like I said, please check out Azure Data Week. It's going to be tons of great content. If anybody joined last year, you guys already know how much it does help. So please, please, please check out Azure Data Week. Visit azuredataweek.com if you guys have any questions, and also visit pragmaticworks.com if you guys want to know any upcoming webinars or any events. You guys will get this scheduled webinar tomorrow in your email. So look out for that. And thank you guys so much for joining. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.